Welcome to You Are Not a Frog, the podcast for GPs, doctors and other professionals in high-stress jobs. Working in today's pressured environment, you may feel like a frog in boiling water. Things have heated up so slowly that you might not have noticed the extra long days becoming the norm. You've got used to feeling constantly busy and often one crisis away from not coping. Let's face it, frogs only have two options: to stay in the pan, be boiled alive, or to hop out and leave. But you are not a frog, and that's where this podcast comes in. You can do more than just hop out or burn out. There are simple changes that you can make which will make a huge difference to your stress levels and help you enjoy life again. I'm your host, Dr Rachel Morris, GP turned executive coach, speaker, specialist in workplace resilience and creator of the Shapes Toolkit training programme. In the podcast, I'll be chatting with friends, colleagues and experts, all who have an interesting take on this stuff, so that together we can take back control and thrive. If you want more resources, including CPD reflection forms for the podcast, then make sure you've signed up to the You Are Not a Frog Collective, and please share these podcasts with anyone who needs them. On with the episode. It's really great to have with me on the podcast today Dr Tommy Perkins, and Tommy is a GP partner and he's also the founder of Medics Money. And Tommy, what else do you do during the week?
Well, I'm a husband, a father to 3 young children. I also do GP with special interest in dermatology, and I run Medics Money with my colleague, Dr. Cantelo.
So pretty full week.
Yeah.
So I came across Tommy. Actually, we were having an interesting conversation on Twitter, and I think Tommy's got a really interesting perspective on money, and I thought it'd be really useful for my listeners and for me as well, because a lot of the time I think money can really trap us into lives in which we're not really thriving and we're not feeling like we're fulfilling our potential, doing what we want to do. So I thought Tommy would be a really good person to explore this with. But first of all, Tommy, just tell me a little bit about Medics Money. So why did you find that? Why did you found that in the first place?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I ask myself why when I'm putting in massive hours on Medics Money, as well as having all those other roles that we talked about. But I think the reason why is because both myself and Ed, who has a unique skill set, he's not only a doctor, but also a chartered accountant and tax advisor. We're very passionate about helping doctors to make better financial decisions. And that just means giving doctors the financial education that we never had at medical school and we never had during training. And as a result, we noticed that doctors were a bit prone to making, suboptimal financial decisions, which is not surprising really, because no one ever sits us down and tells us what we need to know. But I think the real story for Medics Money starts 12 years ago, really, when I left medical school. I had no financial support at medical school. I was one of the first the first and only member of my family to go to university. So I left with 85 grand of debt. Wow. And I realized pretty quickly that I needed to get a solid plan to pay that down. So over those 12 years, I learned how to manage my finances, how to pay the right amount of tax and only the right amount of tax. Don't make charitable donations to HMRC. How to use your money to work for you, how to invest it wisely, how to set a budget and stick to it, and how to pay down debt, because that's the reality for a lot of people today, that they carry a lot of debt and you've got to pay that down. And so, I got pretty good at money management, and then people ask me, oh, you've claimed back, all of the tax rebates on your GP training exams. Could you do mine? And so I was like, okay, I'll show you how to do it. And it kind of spiraled from there, really. But it was a low level thing. And I always wanted to be a doctor. I never wanted to get into this kind of thing. But then I met Ed, and, his knowledge as an accountant and a chartered tax advisor and a doctor kind of made Medics Money what it is today. So that's a very brief story about why we started it. We can get into more detail if you wish.
Yeah. So I think that story, it's very true for a lot of people graduating from university in a lot of debt. And I just want to say that everything you're saying about doctors, I think could be absolutely applied to lawyers and I won't say accountants, because one would expect that accountants can manage their own money, but maybe not. But I think other healthcare professionals, I don't think anybody at university is taught how to manage their money. And even if you're not self-employed, even if you are employed in a role, there's still loads of stuff that we need to know about. But I think it's not just managing our money in terms of what can you claim tax back from or what you can't, but it's actually the whole attitude and concept of money. Because when I teach and talk about how to thrive in life and how to be happy at work, I always start off by talking about the happiness traps I think that we can encounter. You know, one of them being work has to be a chore, work should be a chore, and stress is normal, and I ought to do this and that. I think one of the biggest happiness traps we fall into is that money is everything, and that what we do is for money, and so we end up working all these hours and feeling like a hamster on wheel because we've ended up trapping ourselves into a lifestyle where money is everything, where we absolutely have to earn this to keep up what we've got going on. Is that something you're familiar with?
Absolutely. I think everybody listening to this probably recognizes that they themselves, and myself included, have fallen into that trap. I think there was something really interesting you said a moment ago when you said it's not just doctors. I totally agree, that are not good with their money. But I think the common theme here that I've noticed is, because I went a slightly different background into medicine, I've got lots of friends who run their own businesses. And if you run your own business, you got to get good at money. And the better you are at managing money, the better your business in general. So those guys are on it, right? But if you're a doctor or a lawyer or, a painter or an artist, you get paid for being good at what you're doing, medicine. So you make a lot of money doing medicine, but you don't have these ancillary skills that a self-employed businessman does to bring those in. So you can make a lot of money as a doctor or an artist or a dentist or any of these other high income professionals, but you don't necessarily have the money skills that go with it. Whereas my friends who are running their own construction companies and everything, these guys are on it because that's how they've built a successful business. So that's one thing that I think unifies those that are not so good with money, like doctors and dentists and lawyers. And you rightly excluded accountants from that. I mean, when you spend a bit of time hanging around with an accountant like Ed, you realize how deficient even someone like me who thinks they're okay at it, they're another level. But I think that's the theme that unifies being less good with managing your money, that you earn a lot of money doing what you're good at, being a doctor, but you don't have any extra skills. And in terms of falling into the money happiness, it's the biggest cliche going that money doesn't buy you happiness. I think unless you've had very little money, you can't appreciate that a certain amount of money affords you choices, and what you do with those choices is going to be a major determinant of how happy you are. And the great thing about being a doctor or a dentist or something else is that on your basic salary you earn significantly more than most people in this country, so you have enough money to have choices, and it's just what you do with those choices that can really have a big impact. And you mentioned getting on the hamster wheel, just more, keeping up with the Joneses or whatever other cliches you want to insert. But I think, as doctors, we are perfectionists and we are trained to do our very best. You don't get into medical school without being pretty decent. You don't get to be a good doctor by giving it your absolute all the whole time. And then when you say to a doctor, I drive a 13-year-old Peugeot 207 and the driver's side door lock doesn't open from the inside. So every time I'm driving around with Ed, I have to get out and open him like I'm his chauffeur, which he finds hilarious. But, motoring expenses are extortionate in that I don't want to drive a nice car. I would rather work part-time like I do and drop my kids off 2 days a week at school than drive a brand new car. And it's just a choice that I've made. And medicine has allowed me to make that choice. But I think sometimes you can get in the tunnel of just more, and you don't see these choices.
Yeah, I think that is so true, because I remember watching a documentary, I think it was on Netflix, called Happier or Happy. And it was really interesting. It interviewed this guy who lived in a slum in India. And he drove a rickshaw. He had 4 or 5 children. He was smiling and laughing all the time, actually. And they said that they'd done a lot of studies and his level of happiness was the same as the average level of happiness in the USA. And they worked out sort of what level of financial freedom or of salary you had to get this certain level of happiness, and it wasn't very much. And then the research shows that if you double that and you double it, that doesn't buy you more happiness. You may be able to buy some nicer experiences and, like you said, a nicer car, but actually your happiness level is pretty much the same. Or it might even go down, because if you're doubling your salary, maybe you're having to work even harder or extra jobs, or doing lots of shifts at the weekend when you could be with your family and all that other sorts of things. So money, it's not a linear relationship, money and happiness, is it?
Absolutely not. And everybody's motivations and experiences is better. Some people might be listening to this thinking I can never drive a 13-year-old Peugeot. And that's totally fine. Like, you can make that choice. But I think, you touched on it there in terms of happiness. What kind of keeps me happy is, my relationships with my family and my wife and things, my work, and the working life that keeps me happiness. Health, I think as doctors, we often underestimate that, but yet we're surrounded by it all day. And then I think the final component for me personally in that happiness sort of quadrant is your finances. And, when I had no money and 85 grand of debt, finances was a major determinant on my happiness, because I was constantly, paying down that debt and trying to get into a position that I'm in now, which is where and I don't need to do extra locum shifts to get more money. And it's not because I'm earning a fortune. It's because I've trimmed down my life and I've got my money working for me by different income streams and investments. And the thing is, every single person listening to this podcast is definitely smart enough to do this. But if you don't read or get exposed to the right information, you're not going to do it. And just doing it is the key, because becoming a doctor is becoming harder and harder. In my ebook, which is proving pretty popular online, there's a graph which shows that some doctors' pay over the last 10 years, according to BMA, has dropped by 30% relative to inflation. So that is a major income hit. And if we don't start upping our game as doctors and managing our money better, maximizing it in any way that we can, I think some of us are going to have big problems.
So I'm interested that there were sort of two areas that I think we need to focus on as doctors, as self-employed people, but also as anyone who is employed. The first one is actually managing the sort of business side of things. So, the how you run your business, and you're right. When you have a small business, you have to get on it. Otherwise, I must say I'm still not very good at this, but I do have an accountant that I get to do that stuff for me. So there's that whole business side of things. But I think the other side is the thing where we don't pay enough attention to. That's our own personal budgets and how we spend money and how we plan. And like we touched on, I often do speak to GPs who are just qualifying and they're considering whether to put their children into private school or not. And sometimes I just want to say to them, just consider what these decisions are going to mean for you in 5 or 10 years of time, when you might not be wanting to work 10 sessions a week, or you might not be wanting to work all weekend, because it's very difficult to reverse some of the decisions once they've been made. But I don't think we really think like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's your choice if you think that private school is the best education for your kids. But the reality for certainly a single income, doctor family like ours is that, we just can't afford it. And so it's not an option. And if we were to afford it, I would have to work so many hours. And you mentioned that the relationship between money and earnings, between money and happiness is not linear, but the relationship between earnings and tax is not linear either. So, in my book, we sort of go through 7, it's a totally free ebook to download.
We'll put the links in the show notes so you can get that. Yeah.
We go through sort of 7 things to, get your finances in order in less than 10,000 words, basically. So the first bit is maximizing your income. And that does not mean go to work more. It means make sure that your tax is in order. Make sure that you're claiming the child benefit that you're entitled to, if relevant. Maximize the tax-free childcare. Again, if you have children, sort your tax code out. Okay, so you're maximizing your income, but you're not earning more. You're just making more of what you've got. But the second part and the fundamental bit is minimize expenditure, which you mentioned. And in the book is a little thing which helped me a lot, which was when I was an F2, 85 grand down, I was saving real hard to pay off those debts. So I used to frame any purchase in these terms. That was, how many hours of a post-take ward round would I need to do to buy, a new phone or whatever. And more recently, it's now, how many hours would I need to prepare for the CQC inspection in order to buy X. And when you frame items in those terms, what you're thinking is, okay, how many hours do I want to spend away from my family working in order to buy that item? But also what you need to realize is, because of what I said about our tax system, it's progressive. So, once you go through a certain threshold, you can be paying 20, 40, 45% tax. You actually need to, earn more the more you earn to buy that item. So just try to think about it in those terms. How much time would I prepare to be on a post-take ward round or something else that you don't really like in order to buy that item? And I found that so useful. And I think the other second massive budget tip that I would like to tell everyone is, don't underestimate your household expenses. Recently in the ebook, we tell the story of Sophie, who contacted us. She used the resources on Medic's Money. She was preparing for exams, and she was spending £200 a month on the hospital canteen, right? Not that much, but she trimmed that spend by £166 a month by taking a packed lunch. Okay, so she's going to have a 30-year career. So that at the end would equal 166 times 30 years would be £59,000, right? Okay, so that's the good bit. But if you invest that money, okay, sensibly, and got a 5% return, which historically is very realistic if you do it right, and this is not investment and guidance or advice, and you should always take specialist investment advice. Yes, but if you invested that £59,000 at 5% for 30 years, at the end, you get £139,000, okay? So compound interest, Einstein described as the eighth wonder of the world, and those that understand it, earn it, and those that don't, pay it. Now, I've paid my fair share because I was 85 grand down, and now I'm earning it. So just by making a small change, taking a packed lunch. I mean, the hospital food, not the best anyway.
It's not great anyway. You probably feel much better if you do take your packed lunch.
Yeah, like yesterday, I made myself a tuna sandwich and I didn't quite drain it right. So when I got to work, it was a bit soggy because the water was still in there. It was still better than what the canteen would provide me. And if I do that every day for the next 30 years, at the end, I'm going to have £139,000. So tiny things which you think, as a doctor, you think, buying coffee at the station. Someone wrote to me about my ebook saying, I'm a doctor, I'm rich. If I want to buy coffee every day for £5 at the station, I can. I'm like, yeah, you can. It's your choice. But just compound the interest at 5% over 30 years and see, do you still want that coffee? Because at the end, £5 a day, it's going to be a massive amount. So, that's the other thing that we talk about. And then we get into talking about how to pay down your debt and other things. But I think making the most of your income is what you need to focus on. And as I said at the start, the great thing for doctors is that our base level of income is a brilliant amount. And so if we use it right, we can have a great life, and we don't need to flog ourselves working overtime and locum shifts and everything else that I know that we do.
Yeah, I think there's a flip side to this though, which is a good flip side, which is that money can save you time, can buy you time as well. So it's absolutely what you said. You might want to save not eating that awful food at the canteen, but then I guess if it saves you time when you could be doing something else. So I always think if there's a job that you really don't want to do and you can afford it, pay somebody else it, and you get that time back, and time is worth so much to us. But then there are massively helpful productivity hacks that could also save you time, right? So I guess what that person buying their lunch in the canteen, what I'd say to them is make a massive salad on a Sunday night and then just decant it into 5 bowls. There you go, you've got a really nice meal for the week. Probably only took you as much time as making one salad for the next day, so it's actually a bit of planning. So I think productivity and financial health and time management maybe goes together a bit as well. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And I think if it's one thing that me and Ed have learned in making Medic's Money, when we started it, it was just helping our friends out, and then friends of friends and friends of friends. Last month, over 20,000 people visited our website. We got 17,500 email subscribers.
Wow.
We got the biggest independent network of accountants and financial advisors in the country now. So it's got really, really big. And the thing that we've learned is at the start, we were just doing it all ourselves. And Ed is an accountant, so our budgets were pretty tight. So when I bought this microphone here, you can't quite see it. That was a tough sell with Ed. And what we've learned now is as we got bigger, we have to realize, what can I do and what do I want to do? Yeah. But because you've got money, you can make the choice that actually I don't want to, do all the SEO keywording on my blog. So I'm going to contract that out. And so, like I said, we're super lucky as doctors because money gives us choices. But if we feel that we cannot take those choices for whatever reason, or we cannot see outside of our bubble and that there are choices, then we're stuck. And I guess what we're kind of talking about is what's called FIRE. I don't know if you've heard about that. And I'm not talking about fire training where they patronize you at the start of every placement saying, should you use water or powder on an electrical fire? I'm talking about FIRE of financial independence, retire early. So it's quite a simple concept, really. You maximize your income, maximize your savings, and then by doing that, you can retire a lot earlier than you could do. And there's a couple of books. Your Money or Your Life is probably the most, classic one, and Mr. Money Mustache, the blog. And I think doctors could take a leaf out of that kind of movement. I mean, personally, for me, I'm not pure fire means you just exit your career as soon as you can, having saved as much as you can. I love being a doctor. I don't want to exit my career, but I only do it 3 days a week because that's my level of happiness balance. And by managing my money properly, I can do that. So I think financial independence and retire early is the fire training that doctors actually need, rather than the patronizing talk about water or powder on an electrical fire, which we'll have.
Yeah, your toaster is on fire. What should you do? A, throw a kettle of water over it. B, stick your finger in it.
I always get a bit confused about what CO2 is for, but anyway, we won't talk about that. But if doctors want to know more about fire, I've just popped an article on our blog about that, and that's the kind of thing that we'll be talking about on our podcast and everything like that. But I think nobody ever says that to you in medical school, or no one ever talks about, doctors, we don't talk about money because we're here for the vocation, right? Well, yeah, but we also have bills to pay. We have massive debts to pay, and we have other things that we like to do other than work.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to someone who was sort of looking at planning their career and planning their ideal week and thinking, actually, what sort of choices should I make about schools and where I live and cars and all holidays, all those sorts of things? What would your sort of advice be?
I think it's such a massive question that thanks, but
you've got 10 minutes. Solve that problem, please.
I think what I've learned is that everybody's different and everybody has different priorities. So I told you I drive a 13-year-old car, but I've got a garage full of brand new surfboards. I mean, they are really nice. So my priority is surfboards, not cars. Other people may be different, but as long as you can get your head around making those choices, as I said, money doesn't buy you happiness, but it does give you choices. And if you can make those choices and realize, I realized when I was working 10 sessions a week, I wasn't happy. I was burning out. And working 6 sessions a week, part-time, as the media like to call it, I mean, that's still more hours in a week than your average non-NHS employee does. But I'm just happier like that. And I couldn't have made that choice if I hadn't got my financial affairs in order, because I'd still be £85,000 in debt, with it all stacked up on cards like I was at the start. So I think it's difficult. I don't want to impart my values on someone else, but I do still think that my thing that I said, that if you're gonna buy something that you don't really need, right, which is a lot of stuff, just think about it in units of time. So how much of my time does it take to earn that? And don't think that is your hourly rate, because that is not your take-home pay. Because of the progressive nature of the tax system, sometimes if you're earning £1, you might only be taking home, after tax, pension, national insurance, you might be taking home 25-30p. So don't think about it like that. Think about it in unit of time. Yeah. It is depressing, but you got to know this, because then if someone says to you, I'm earning £49,000 and I'm going to do a locum shift, and that's going to take me over to £50,000. Well, I'm going to start tapering my child benefits. I'm going to lose that. I'm going to jump up a tax bracket. My pension contributions are going to go up. So you got to evaluate it in a smart way. Just don't as I said, doctors are very good at just, if there's trouble, work harder. You can't do that. You got to work smarter.
Yeah. I think finances are something that we just don't spend much time thinking about and planning. We spend a lot of time worrying about them, but not a lot of time planning. And I think seeing a financial advisor and taking some time just to get really clear in your mind how you can become financially independent, and how I think that with the aim of not to have to tie yourself down into a job that you hate, or not to have to tie yourself down into a job where you have to work more than you want to work. Because I think you're right. I think general practice is a brilliant career, but it's quite unsustainable if you're working 12 sessions. Well, my view is it's very difficult to work 12 sessions a week and still maintain sanity, because it is so intense. But if you've trapped yourself with what some of the choices that you've made, and I know that a lot of choices that people choices that people make aren't choices. What I mean by that is that some of us have obligations that we cannot get out of, particularly if we're the main breadwinner. But I think even then, we are not spending a lot of time thinking and planning. And that is just one thing that will release you from that happiness trap of money is everything and I have to do this to earn the money. And there might well be other ways of getting the same income without sort of completely flogging yourself. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I can sympathize with both ends of the spectrum here, because when I started, I was £85,000 down. That is not a good position to be in. And at that point, my 4 things I mentioned about what keeps me happy, the money quadrant was incredibly massive for me. It was huge because I was constantly thinking about how to pay the debt down. I was maximizing everything. I was making sure I checked my utility bills, not buying anything at hospital, just not spending any money, because to save that amount of money on a junior doctor's salary these days is really hard. And then I kind of been through the spectrum to where I am now, which is that I realized that I love being a GP, but when I do it 10 sessions a week, I get really miserable. And I get less good as a doctor because I get heading towards burnout. And if I didn't have the ability to make those financial choices, which I'm incredibly happy that I can, I would not be such a good doctor. So I'm a better 3-day-a-week doctor than I am a 5-day-a-week doctor. And the fact that I get to spend the other 2 days running Medics Money to help other people make better financial decisions is really satisfying for me. And I never planned that when I went to medical school, but it's really, we get such great feedback from people that have used our free resources. The whole site's totally free to use. The ebook's totally free. And then the other thing that you mentioned was getting advice. So when you're trying to save money, it seems contradictory that you would pay for advice. But if you get the right advice for the right price, it can significantly enhance your wealth, and that can facilitate your choices. So the other big reason we started Medics Money was because doctors didn't know where to get advice. And what we noticed was that non-specialist advisors, so non-specialist accountants, were more likely to give out incorrect advice, because doctors have quirks to their finances, the NHS pension, banding, payroll, all of those fun things that we all love. So we decided to set up a network where the accountants are verified by us. So we go through a huge due diligence check with them. And they also have reviews from doctors, like you. And the thing about reviews, online reviews, is fake reviews, but all of our reviews are verified by GMC number. So, it's as good as we can get. And then the other thing about where to find a good financial advisor, I mean, when I was at medical school, I said I had no financial education, but I did have a financial advisor come and talk to us. And they basically tried to persuade me that I needed to buy life insurance. I said, oh, what does life insurance do then? I didn't know anything. Like, well, if you die, your dependents will get a payout. I was like, well, I've got no kids. I've got no wife. I've got nothing, right? Like, I've got minus 85 something. Why do I need it? And, oh, you just need it. I was like, okay, like, tell me more. Well, it's free for the first year. So do you want it? I was like, well, why do I need it? And actually, there's just so many salespeople like that who would try to exploit our financial naivety. But there's also amazing financial advisors, some of whom we've got on our network, that can enhance your wealth for a fair price. And they work with doctors, they understand doctors. And again, they're verified by us, reviewed by doctors like you. So I think, getting advice would be one of my tips. You're going to need to educate yourself, but that can only take you so far. Like, I have an accountant, I have a financial advisor, and I'm not the easiest person to advise because I've got my own ideas, but I really value their advice because they stop me from doing stupid things, because I'm not a financial advisor or an accountant. So I really value their input, in the same way that patients come to us sometimes with a pre-formed idea of what their diagnosis is. And it probably sounded pretty reasonable when they sort of read it up on Google, but when they say it out loud, with the benefit of our experience as the doctors, we know it's ridiculous. So I think getting good advice would be another massive tip.
Yeah, I think that's something that we as professionals are bad at doing, because we think, I think particularly GPs, because we turn our hand at most things. Being a general practitioner, the clue is in the title. We think, oh yeah, well, I can do the money thing as well. But one thing I have learned through starting my own business is someone who has been trained to do it will always do it so much better than you in a much quicker time, and will always save you money. So just getting advice really important. So I just want to bring us back to this whole getting free of the money happiness trap. I think through COVID, that's been quite a nice, not nice, but I'll say nice leveler, as in, it has actually brought us back to what's really important. And for me, just knowing that seeing my friends for an evening is just as good sitting on a deck chair in a garden as going out to a fancy restaurant and spending hundreds of pounds on a meal. So I think it has probably started us thinking what is really important in life.
Yeah, I think, again, I don't want to impart my values onto somebody else. And I just reiterate that if you have money, you have the choice. But last year we went to the Alps for a week, which was amazing. We took the kids, and I love the Alps in the summer. I was so excited to go there. This summer, we are going on a sort of a cycle tour within about 5 miles of our house, basically, to eat at a pub, like in the garden, and then cycle home. And I am more excited about that this year than the whole trip to the Alps last year. So I think you're right. It's just helped to reframe for a lot of people what is important. And what is important to me is having a relaxing time with my family and just having fun. And I probably don't need to go to the Alps or anywhere else to do that. And yeah, I'm going on holiday, but I'm not going more than 5 miles from my house. And I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, there is something about simplicity. I know there's quite a big movement at the moment about, how to find happiness through these various disciplines like simplicity and solitude, and trying to sort of eschew the materialism trap that I think we had just wound ourselves up into. Consumption. And we don't need to consume as much. We really don't.
Yeah. And I think as doctors, we're a bit prone to that, like I said, because we strive for excellence. We don't get to be a doctor without being excellent. And no one ever goes to a patient and say, right, I'm going to do a really mediocre job with this patient. It just never happens. You always do your best. And that kind of accelerates itself into, well, I could get an iPhone SE, which is like the budget model, which I run and I love it. Or I could get the iPhone 11 and it's only like £350 more. And it's like, well, both of them are phones. Both of them are really good. I've got a lovely iPhone SE. I've also had an iPhone 11 and it was absolutely no different. So, it's just choices. I don't want to impart anything on anyone, but if you can get a grip on your finances, it can have a massive impact on your happiness because you're freed from some of those things that you talked about. And often when, you listen to people that have burnt out, I'm sure we all know colleagues that have burnt out. It's not because they worked less. Yeah. It's because they worked so much and then it just got in this cycle that they couldn't get out of. And, if you get in too deep with debt, it's terrible. I've been there, like all the way through medical school. I could see it racking up, and it's a terrible feeling. But when you get educated about it, get the right advice, you can bring back under control. And I think, the ebook, I keep going on about it, but it's totally free. It just sums up a little sort of plan for doctors or other high-income professions to get just where to start, because that's the thing that we get asked to make money. Like, okay, I've just become a GP. Where do I start? And we got everything you need. If you're thinking about becoming a partner, we can talk to you about that. We've got information about that. Locums or any other doctors, we've got it. But the book puts everything together in a super simple, what I call your financial PDP. So we all have PDPs for our clinical work, yeah, but I bet you don't have a financial PDP. And I would say that your financial PDP, which you probably don't have, is as important as your clinical PDP, which we all have thanks to the joys of appraisal.
Yeah, it's interesting you're saying financial PDP, but I think, there's a very famous proverb, isn't it, that where your treasure is, there your heart is as well. So it's not just the financial PDP isn't just about money. It's about where your priorities are. It's about what's important to you in life. It's about how you live. Actually, money is a good sort of litmus test of that. So instead of calling it a financial PDP, it's sort of like a life PDP, and you can measure that by looking at the choices that you're making with your money, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And also, if you have a plan, like generally doctors like plans, like when we do revision, we get a revision plan, we get all our post-it notes out. Yeah, we like a plan. For me, even though I was £85,000 down, just having a plan and I could forecast how I was going to pay it off, it just feels so good because you're back in control of your money, So we have our family PDP, so financial PDP, which I do with my wife, and I'm trying to involve my kids as well because that they need to start learning about this stuff. But if you do your family PDP together for your finances, you might have to make difficult choices, like we're going to sell the rental car or the finance car and get a normal car or whatever. If you make those choices together as a family, then everybody's on board. Everyone understands what the end result and the end goal is. And it's just a lot easier. And we get really into this in the book about how to make your PDP as a family. But I think that would be one thing that, if you get good at your money, you can pass that down to your children, and then hopefully they will not spend all your inheritance.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think kids need to be educated. It's one of the reasons why we make sure we give ours an allowance, and we don't just give them loads of extra money, because they have to learn. They have to learn to budget.
Yeah.
Um,
My car is super clean, and my windows are, well, they're not great at washing the windows, but they're all right at the car. So yeah, I mean, they're already doing that. So
yeah. So I just wanted to finish off by sort of mentioning one thing that I think is quite important. I heard a talk recently about creating a sort of buffer zone in life. So a buffer zone with time, so you're not spending all your time isn't completely used up, and a buffer zone with money, so you haven't got all your money allocated, and that then will allow you to be generous to other people and to give and to regularly give. Where does sort of giving come in all of this for you?
yeah, again, I think it's really interesting that you mentioned the buffer. So what we would call that in financial terms is an emergency fund. So generally we would, recommend between 3 and 6 months of your outgoings saved up in an emergency fund. So when I was a locum GP with no fixed work, I had 6 months saved up. Now with secure employment, I'm back down to 3 months. And that just gives you, whatever happens to me, I've got 3 months of bills in the bank, right? And during COVID, some people that thought they would never be in that situation are. So some of my colleagues only do private work. It's stopped. It's shut down. And they've got tremendous bills to pay. So that's what I would say about the buffer zone. And I think in terms of giving, charitable giving and the like, that just comes back down to, if you have money, you also have choices. And who doesn't like to give to their favorite charity? And at Medics Money, we actually work with the Royal Medical Benevolent Fund. So we provide them some content. And I really like what they do, because they probably help people like me 12 years ago. I never needed their help because I just cracked on with it. But so I really like what they do. And we provide them content so that doctors can start to get a handle on their finances and get their way out of whatever trouble they are. And it's really interesting talking to them that a lot of doctors that they help, it is financial trouble. And, public might not expect that. When I was young, I thought all doctors were earning a fortune. And unfortunately, I know the truth now. And so I think, again, if you can manage your finances, you get the choices.
Yeah, I just think giving is really important. It's one of the ways to well-being, and there's a lot of evidence about, actually that will increase your happiness. So, but a lot of us, if we're only just living up to our means, or living beyond our means, there's going to be nothing left, unless you've said, right, giving is my absolutely fundamental, which I know a lot of people do, and they give that first and foremost, which I think is a really good habit to get into. But like you said, it's good to be able to have this not just a buffer zone, emergency zone, but a generosity zone, so you can help people out, so you can see a cause that you want to donate to. But you're right, unless you've got your sort of financial PDP or whatever, then actually probably not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. It's just about getting your finances in a position that you can make these choices, and that's what it's about, really. On our website, it says we empower doctors to make better financial decisions, and I think you probably had a flavor of what we do. This is a bit of a snapshot, but if you can get yourself empowered to, with the knowledge, you can make these choices, and it's benefited me tremendously. And I've not done anything exceptional. I've just done the basics, and every doctor can do that. And then maybe we'll all be happier and better doctors and working better hours.
Well, it's like you said, it gives you choices, and it means that you have that choice about how you develop your career to really thrive in what you do. So I've been noting a few top tips. So number 1, get advice. Number 2, make a budget. Number 3, make a financial PDP.
Definitely.
Have you got any other top tips that I will put in the list on the show notes?
Yeah, I think we talked about it a minute ago. What we call it in the book is build a moat. So what I'm saying there is get an emergency fund. 3 months is a good point. But also don't neglect, protect, you've worked hard to become a doctor, and you need to protect that asset. So I don't have insurance for my washing machine or my phone or my laptop, but I do insure my income with income protection and life insurance. And that is a major area where getting independent financial advice, like the advisors on Medics Money, is absolutely key, because there's lots of non-independent or restricted advisors, and they actually dominate the medical advice market, bizarrely. And for various reasons, it's better to use an independent financial advisor like those on Medics Money. And I think it's, again, I don't want to impart my own values on on other people, but your life experiences shape what your thoughts are. So I've decided to drive a rubbish car and drop my kids off at school and pick them up twice a week. And for me, it just feels, I mean, I'm sure there's lots of people who do the school run every day, think that's really boring. But for me, it feels amazing because for so many years, I couldn't do that because I was just working too many hours. So I think, like I said, money does not get you happiness, but it does give you choices. And if you make the right choices managing your money by managing it better, then you can have it all on a very modest salary, without needing all these trappings of excess that you talked about earlier.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much, Tommy. That has been really, really helpful. So we'll put all those links in the show notes, particularly to the ebook and the website. If somebody wanted to contact you, how can they find you?
Yeah, best way is via Medics Money website, medicsmoney.co.uk. At the top, there's a contact us tab. We love to have feedback. We basically shaped Medics Money due to feedback. We are shortly going to be launching the Medics Money podcast, which was from feedback from our readers who said, come on, you guys have got to do a podcast. And so we're laying down a few episodes and having a practice today with the very best at podcasting. You're good stuff.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, it's been really interesting. Thank you so much. And we'll have to get you back on again to explore this in more detail, I think.
I'd love to.
Thanks, Tommy. See you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye. Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please share it with your friends and colleagues. Please subscribe to my You Are Not a Frog email list and subscribe to the podcast. And if you have enjoyed it, then please leave me a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. So keep well, everyone. You're doing a great job. You got this.